Story 1. That your best and sincere efforts towards something you truly wanted just weren't good enough. Story 2. The worst feeling is that moment when fear creeps in and you realize you are completely alone with it. There is no plan, no backup, just your heartbeat and whatever is staring back in the dark. Story 3. Waking up one day all alone and realizing that you failed to succeed in life while everyone you know has progressed. Story 4. Seeing the look of love in your dog's eyes, which also seem to be asking for help, and knowing that all you can do for them is euthanasia. That was my day today. Story 5. I haven't experienced it, but losing a child would have to be the worst feeling in the world. The worst feeling I have experienced was my dad telling me, "I hate who you are. I can't even pretend to love you anymore." Story 6. Being an only child and watching your family age and pass away makes you realize that you will soon be alone. Story 7. Worst pain that nobody should feel but some do is losing a child. Worst pain that everyone should feel and most do is heartbreak. Worst pain that nobody should feel but everyone does is the passing of parents. Story 8. The worst feeling in the world is when you realize someone you care about deeply does not feel the same way, or they have moved on while you are still stuck in the past. It is like an emotional disconnect that you cannot fix, no matter how hard you try. Story 9. When you are going through your worst heartbreak and the people you thought would be there for you are not, it leaves you to fend for yourself in your most challenging, isolating, and lonely moments. If I heal from this heartbreak, I have told myself that these friends will be no more. We all deserve to feel that our friends have our backs, especially when we can barely make it through the days. We all deserve to have our best efforts reciprocated in times when we need it the most. I will never forget their betrayal. Story 10. Watching the love of your life die is an experience I have never faced myself. However, whenever someone loses the love of their life, I can feel every ounce of raw emotion they are expressing. This is a strange phenomenon. Story 11. I have thought about this in depth to reach an answer, and I have come up with the dread that comes with the realization that something is irreparable. It could be anything: an object, a person, a relationship, a memory. Anything that can be broken, lost, or forgotten. Once you realize you are left with no other option but to start the grieving process, it is incredibly difficult. Story 12. The worst feeling is likely that deep, gut-wrenching sense of helplessness, like when you know something is wrong, but you cannot fix it or control it. Story 13. The worst feeling I ever had was losing my parents. Whenever I imagined living without them, I felt completely destroyed. However, losing them for real is the worst feeling I have ever experienced. It's awful, like being in complete darkness without knowing what to do or where to go. Story 14. Betrayal of trust, especially for something egregious, can have a lasting impact. Pain, in general, feels overwhelming. However, you often recover without long-lasting trauma. Betrayal tends to linger much longer and can significantly alter your perspective on love and relationships. I have experienced much pain in my life and a few major betrayals, and I would choose pain every time over betrayal. Story 15. Loneliness is the feeling that if you died today, nobody would notice. Some days you can love yourself enough to survive, but other days, often, it just feels empty and alone. Story 16. Personally, I was terrified of losing my baby during pregnancy. She was fine and is now 19 months old, but the experience was frightening. Story 17. Caring for a grandparent with severe dementia who has regressed to an infantile state is incredibly challenging. They can only lay in bed, eat when spoon-fed, sleep, and express discomfort through noises. The most difficult aspect is the empty, unrecognizing look in their eyes. The grandmother who once enjoyed telling funny stories, bird-watching, knitting, crocheting, and baking delicious cookies is no longer present. It feels as if she has become an empty shell, as if she has died while still alive. Story 18. I have cracked my head open, broken both wrists, fractured an elbow, shattered my other arm, gashed my leg, and hit a guardrail while going 70 miles per hour. A toothache is definitely the worst pain I have felt. Story 19. The feeling is a mixture of loneliness and a sense that the world is against you. I no longer feel that way, but in my opinion, it was the worst feeling a person could experience. Story 20. That awful feeling when you realize you left your phone at home, sent a risky message, or when your stomach just drops out of nowhere. Pure panic. Story 21. One of the worst feelings is the sense of having no true friends. You are surrounded by people you like and spend time with, but you don't have that friend to whom you can share everything and be yourself. It feels very isolating and lonely, even when you have many people around you. Story 22. Watching the people you consider friends exclude you from gatherings and post group photos without you. Story 23. Waking up in the middle of the night after a terrifying nightmare, only to realize that you are all alone. Story 24. Coming home from work to find your wife has taken her own life is a profound tragedy. You must now live the rest of your life without the person you loved most in the world. Story 25. This is a frustrating question to ask, as most people will have no idea what the worst feeling in the world is. This entire comment section feels like a huge gaslight to all the chronically ill individuals. To stay on topic, I would say that knowing you have a degenerative disease for which there is no cure is pretty high on the list. Since the question was quite vague, I will mention that the worst single experience I've had, worse than pancreatitis, was akathisia. People have committed suicide while experiencing it. I would have done just about anything to stop it, and it only lasted about 15 minutes. It was the worst 15 minutes of my life, and I probably won't return to the emergency room as a result. Story 26. Feeling overwhelmed by the realities of this world and whether you will ever discover the truth. It is not about religion or spirituality, but rather the actual functioning of society and history and how we arrived at this point. There are things we understand and things we may never fully grasp. Story 27. Losing your mom, who is your only close relative and trusted friend, is incredibly painful. You have been with her for 41 years, and now she's gone. The pain in your heart feels like a big hole. Everything reminds you of her. The smell of food, places you've been, and your childhood. I just wish I could hug her one more time. Story 28. You said horrible things to a person, and then they suddenly died, leaving you unable to express your sorrow. Story 29. Destroying a relationship, whether it is with friends or in a romantic context, can occur due to a single quick and thoughtless decision that you believed was harmless. Story 30. I lost my dad nearly a year ago. So many times, I see something and think, oh, I should tell him about this. Then I pull out my phone and remember that I can't tell him anymore. Story 31. Having a romantic relationship with someone else because the love of your life will not speak to you after she moved to a foreign country and told you not to return after you followed her there. Story 32. There are many difficult experiences, such as losing a pet, losing a loved one, receiving a disease diagnosis, and facing fear and pain. Recently, I have also been dealing with diarrhea and cramps. Story 33. Losing your dog is an unexpected event that can happen in just 10 minutes, leaving you powerless to do anything. Experiencing the loss of a loved one is devastating. Watching your partner suffer an overdose in your arms is horrifying. Although she recovered after a seizure, the first 2 minutes left a permanent scar. 10 minutes later, she revealed that she had been unfaithful and intended to continue her actions. Story 34. Renal colic does not turn off your brain or put you in shock. You are conscious and feel every last second of agony. Story 35. For me, it was the moment I thought I had lost my niece in a store. She was quick. At about 4 years old, she demanded to walk all the time, which was fine. The problem was that she liked to wander. I remember picking something up, flipping it over, reading the back, and then looking up to find that she was gone. She was 3 aisles over, helping herself to lip balm. The emotions I experienced and the dread in those short 3 minutes are indescribable. I can't imagine the anguish parents feel when they don't know what has happened to their children. Story 36. Just the thought of losing my wife, the love of my life for over 40 years, gives me the worst feelings I have ever had. I can't imagine how much worse it would be if it really happens. I pray I never have to find out, Story 37. When something you always expect to happen to someone else happens to you, we're all someone else to someone else. Story 38. The realization that I will have to work my entire youth just to have the chance of possibly dying with dignity at the end of my life, if everything goes right, including factors beyond my control. Story 39. That feeling when you completely mess up, you are entirely in the wrong, and there is no valid excuse for your actions or inactions. Then you replay it in your mind for a while and feel bad about it. Story 40. Knowing you did something very wrong and bad, and you are just waiting for people to find out. Conversely, the best feeling in the world is coming clean and being forgiven. Story 41. You are putting all the effort into maintaining the relationship or friendship, and no matter what you do or how hard you try, the other person will never match your energy or care as much about you. Story 42. Feeling like you haven't achieved anything because that one dream you've worked hard to attain has faced many failures and setbacks that, in hindsight, weren't your fault. You may feel down because of it. Then you enter a relationship and see your partner succeeding with the same dream in less than 6 months. This puts me in an emotional spiral. While I am happy for them, I can't help but feel disappointed in myself. Story 43. I am in the middle of it. My 7-year-old cat, best friend, soulmate, and everything is about to cross the rainbow bridge, and it is absolute hell. My only solace is that, while I couldn't fix her, even though I tried everything, I can take her suffering away and transfer it to me. Story 44. This hasn't happened to me yet, but I can't imagine anything worse than receiving a call from your doctor telling you that you need to get to the hospital urgently after undergoing a cancer test. I would much rather face any other situation than have to confront that. Story 45. For me, I left my career in the army so that my wife could live closer to her parents. My wife and I got jobs in South Florida. My wife quit her job due to stress, so I am working 70 hours a week. My wife cheated because I was never around. My wife had a mental breakdown induced by alcohol and drugs and ended up in a mental hospital for a month. I stuck around to aid in her recovery, acted as her de facto caregiver, and tried to rebuild our relationship. As soon as we were given the green light by her doctors, my wife went back to the man she cheated on me with, leaving me to sell the house and take care of 3 dogs, one of which was her service dog that I bought for her. So that was a pretty bad feeling. Story 46. When there is nothing more you can do to save your beloved dog or cat, you hold them in your arms while they are being euthanized, and you feel them die. That is the worst feeling in the world for me. Story 47. Trusting someone who had ill intentions and not only didn't care about you, but actively wanted to see you experience prolonged suffering as a result of their actions. Story 48. Grief is unparalleled. It follows the loss of a loved one, whether a parent, sibling, or perhaps the most painful of all, a child. Nothing in the world hurts more. Story 49. Betrayal may be the worst feeling anyone experiences in their lifetime. It is often someone close enough to you who can stab you in the back. Someone has exploited your vulnerabilities, as well as those of others. All humans are vulnerable at some point. They chose to ruthlessly end your career. Story 50. Knowing that someone you loved and cared about doesn't feel the same anymore, and being alone at night, makes you wish you had someone. Story 51. When you know that you made a mistake and there is no way to fix it. The dread of waiting to face the consequences is just awful. Story 52. Hearing your child scream for help late at night over the phone, while they are over 400 kilometers away, can make you feel helpless in your inability to save them. Story 53. Being disowned by those you love for political or religious beliefs is a painful experience. Don't let it happen. Luckily, there has been reconciliation, thanks to something we call love. Story 54. Having borderline personality disorder is associated with a high risk of suicidal behavior. 70% of individuals with borderline personality disorder attempt suicide at least once, and 35% attempt it more than once. 13% complete the act of suicide, and it is a thought that many consider on a weekly basis. This struggle is exemplified by Chester Bennington of Lincoln Park, who tragically took his own life. Story 55. I know the question is serious and people are too, but when you hit your pinky toe on the corner, it really hurts. Story 56. Grieving a child lost at a young age is tragic. Although I have not experienced this myself, I have watched my best friend go through it for years, and it is unimaginable. Nothing else can compare. Story 57. In my experience, when someone you love dies unexpectedly and you never get to say goodbye or tell them you love them one last time. Story 58. Grief. Feeling paralyzed in sadness, trying to negotiate with a higher power to bring them back when you know it's impossible. Understanding that you may never be happy again. Slowly forgetting memories. Yes, grief. Story 59. Pure, complete, unadulterated despair and hopelessness. I've been there before, and it was by far the worst thing I have ever felt in my life. I thought my entire life was over. All I could do was sit and mull over every aspect of my life up to that point, which only made me feel worse. I couldn't do anything to get out of that situation, even temporarily. My foster mother made me believe I had COVID-19 and literally locked me in my room with nothing to do, 2 bathroom breaks a day, and 5-minute showers twice a week. I wasn't allowed to do school online, write in my diary, or even sleep for more than a few hours. I ate once every 2 days and had 1 glass of water each day. She wouldn't give me my medications either. All I could do was just sit there and do nothing, and it completely destroyed my mind. I was trapped, feeling like a hostage in a house where I was meant to be loved and cared for. I became so despaired and hopeless that I thought about jumping out the window, which was on the 2nd story. I tried one night, but it set off an alarm. No food for a week was my punishment. Water was just once a day. I was allowed even less sleep. I was 17 when that happened. But one day, my caseworker came to do a typical check-in on me. When my foster mother had to let her see me, she could tell I wasn't being treated properly. I hadn't slept, eaten, or had water at that point, and I was dirty. Those were the worst few months of my life. I was hopeless, and I thought my foster mother was going to let me starve to death. Story 60. Going from a red-eye flight, peacefully sleeping to dying in 19 seconds. You are lightly sleeping on your overnight trip, excited to arrive at your destination by morning. Outside your window, you see nothing but darkness. Then, all at once, you are jolted awake as something is wrong with the plane. If you are aware of aviation, you might have time to realize your plane has collided with the ocean. Some may lose consciousness from the crash. They are the lucky ones. Everyone still awake would be screaming in terror. All the lights go out, and you find yourself upside down in complete darkness as the cold ocean water fills the plane. Perhaps you unbuckle your seatbelt to reach the emergency door, but the plane is sinking fast, and you are confused because it is nearly upside down. You take one last breath. You have just 19 seconds from the plane hitting the water and losing its left wing until it completely crashes and sinks. That's the time it takes to be jolted awake and die by drowning, upside down in total darkness. That's how the 70 people on Aeroperu Flight 603 came to their deaths. Story 61. The worst I experienced was inflammation in the middle of my 40s. If someone had offered to shoot me, I would have been tempted to accept the offer. Story 62. Being 1/4 siblings and watching your 3 older siblings have babies when you can't is heart-wrenching. Coming to terms with being just an aunt while also feeling happy for your sisters and loving your nieces without bitterness is incredibly difficult. I dislike feeling this way. Story 63. Almost hitting 30 and still feeling lost in life. No career, no nice big house, and nothing to show except working in low-paying jobs. It's the worst feeling. Story 64. Losing someone you love to COVID and not being able to be there for them in their final days is incredibly hard. Losing my dad that way is something I will never be able to cope with. Story 65. Crying on your birthday every year is, for me, the worst feeling ever, aside from other countless things. Story 66. Knowing you won't achieve your hopes and dreams and not being able to do anything about it can be distressing. I no longer have hopes, dreams, or aspirations because circumstances beyond my control have taken them from me. Story 67. Probably losing your child. Just thinking about people who have experienced this makes me feel horrible. I hope I never have to go through it. Story 68. I have to say, getting a cotton swab coated in fiberglass inserted for a sexually transmitted disease test is not great. I have experienced some emotional pain that has lasted longer or may have been more traumatizing, but I swear at times I can still feel it when I urinate. There has to be a better way. Story 69. Having your family die and your extended family abandon you entirely leaves you alone to fend for yourself at age 16, knowing you will never have a support system or anyone to rely on. Story 70. Earlier this year, my dad faced a serious cancer diagnosis. Things looked grim initially, and I had to come to terms with the possibility of losing him. Thankfully, he found a great surgeon who helped remove the cancerous mass, but it was uncertain for a while. The thought of possibly losing my dad was one of the worst feelings I've ever experienced. I felt a constant knot in the pit of my stomach and an overwhelming sense of helplessness and despair. It was truly overwhelming. Story 71. For me, snapping out of a bipolar manic episode when I didn't know I was in one was abrupt. The first time I experienced this, the feeling hit me so hard in such a short span of time that I had to call a lifeline. The mental anguish and whiplash were worse than any physical pain I have ever felt, and I have endured some severe injuries. Story 72. Writing drop database or remove recursive force and realizing that you wrote the wrong string afterward, just after you hit the enter key. Story 73. Knowing you did something horrible and that even the people who are aware of your actions continue to make excuses for you. Story 74. One-sided efforts. No matter how much effort you put into any kind of relationship, whether romantic or otherwise, people may just stare at you, leaving you alone to second-guess everything. Story 75. Being a person who wants to live knowing you will die. I faced the opposite problem, which is less pathetic. Story 76. When you watch your parents continue to become their parents, you start to realize that they will never truly love you. There is no reason to try with them as they have made their decision. You cannot get your point across to them, and all that caring and nurturing will never happen. Story 77. Embarrassment, disappointment, and betrayal. If you are a parent, it can be challenging when your child is suffering and there is no immediate solution to their pain. Story 78. Loss and all the pain associated with it for me was a pit of despair, with ever-worsening depths and suffering. Story 79. When I was 12, we were driving home, and my mom stopped to help a family whose car had broken down. She took one of the women to get petrol and was assisting her when my sister and I fought over the front seat. I got there first and buckled the seatbelt so she couldn't pull me out. I heard her scream, turned, and saw headlights coming straight for us. I faced forward, and as the car hit us from behind, propelling us forward, I watched my mom hit the windscreen right in front of me and felt our wheels go over the body of the woman. In the moments that followed, the smell of petrol, my sister screaming, and watching my mom lying unconscious on the grass left me uncertain about whether to get my little sister out of the car or to wait for an adult. I didn't know if my mom was dead or alive, or if the woman was. That feeling was complete helplessness. Having that moment replay in my mind over and over during post-traumatic stress disorder flashbacks for the next decade and a half, whenever I was in a car or saw red and blue lights, felt like heartbreak. Story 80. I feel stuck. I live in a state that is not for me, Tennessee, and for about a year I thought I was trapped here. However, I have family in Illinois ready to help me move at the end of the year. My job is transferable, and my partner is eager to leave this backward state. We moved here from Vermont only because we could not afford the rent there, and I have no family to rely on in that area. My partner has family in this state, and we thought it doesn't matter where you live but how you live. However, when it comes to feeling safe and free, it does matter where I live. That feeling of being stuck and thinking I will have to deal with this for the rest of my life is one of the worst feelings. It has made me contemplate just taking a long walk off a short dock. I am a child-free queer minority woman, and the specific area I live in has a very backward small-town mentality. It's not surprising that I have no friends. Whenever I try to make friends, they are either too young for me, as I am 29 and only enjoy the company of my younger siblings, or they are on their third or fourth child and don't have time for themselves anymore. Not wanting kids is viewed differently here. People are more surprised that I do not have any children by now. So far, no one has stated they will have kids, but many question why I don't have them. When I list my reasons, I normally receive no response. I try not to come off as rude, but I am autistic and can be blunt because I find honesty respectable. I am not mean, but some aspects of parenthood are unappealing to me, and it is my choice not to deal with it. I can ramble on all day, but for me, the worst feeling is doing everything I can and still feeling absolutely stuck in a terrible situation with no real way out, losing motivation to exist because why would I want to endure a difficult situation? Story 81. The worst I have ever felt is when my dog of 18 years died and when I found out my girlfriend was having an affair with my friend. Both experiences devastated me. Story 82. Knowing that the state I live in is so heavily influenced by gerrymandering that my ballot last November, as blue as possible, was never going to mean anything. Story 83. You need to go to the bathroom, but you are unable to due to constipation. You take a laxative to help, but it doesn't provide relief. That is the worst feeling. Story 84. Probably losing a child, parent, or best friend. Having everything finally work out for you, mental health, finances, and overall well-being, after living in misery, and then becoming terminally ill. From experience, drug come-downs are difficult, and momentary bad experiences or taking too much psychedelics can feel like the worst or the best sensations ever. Story 85. I have gone through a lot. Cancer, molestation, a friend committing suicide, and various other experiences, but I think the worst feeling is when something happens like an attack or a car accident, where you're absolutely convinced you're about to die and regret everything. I have had a few of those moments, and they have scarred me, honestly. Story 86. Knowing that someone who is no longer speaking to you would understand if you had the chance to explain, but you never will. Story 87. For me, it feels like a combination of numbness from depression and sadness. It was horrific, but thankfully, it is not as bad now. Story 88. Being ignored by people you thought were your friends and not receiving the grade you expected or hoped for on your exams. Story 89. Watching your mom get in a car crash in front of you as a young teenager. The vehicle bursts into flames and explodes. In those split seconds, you think your mom is dead. Story 90. Being trapped in your own mind, an abusive relationship, an unstable home, or an underage job that is overwhelming can feel inescapable. It could be anything: bullying, a toxic friendship. Just being trapped is suffocating, panic-inducing, and all-encompassing. Story 91. Navigating adult life while realizing you have no safety net can be challenging, especially when you lack true friendships and come from a dysfunctional family that is struggling financially. This situation makes it difficult to take a break from work, even when you desperately need it. At times, you may feel lonely even in a crowded room. Story 92. Realizing that the people you know and care for do not actually know you that well is closely followed by a crippling loneliness that never really goes away. Story 93. When you're cozy and warm in bed and you have to use the restroom. The best feeling is when you get back in bed after you've done so. Story 94. For me, it was being owned by guardians as an adult, knowing I was property without any basic rights to my own life, to make my own decisions, to have privacy, to save money and own my own possessions. My guardians would steal my most prized belongings and often threw them away. They would take my money and emotionally, psychologically, financially, and medically abuse me. I was a slave in the eyes of the law, to be owned and bargained with, which literally led to a suicide attempt. Thankfully, I am now free and pursuing a higher education, but it took 3 brutal years to terminate the abusive guardianship. 3 long years that I could have spent doing more productive things during the most formative years of my life. 3 years I will never get back. The entire guardianship lasted 6 years. I do not know if I can forgive them, but we still talk. I try to tell myself they thought they were doing what was best for me, but how was stealing my things and isolating me supposed to help? Story 95. Walking out of the judge's office and suddenly realizing you married the wrong person. Knowing you are in for a world of hurt. It feels even worse if you have alienated friends and family who knew before you did that it was a terrible mistake waiting to happen, leaving you alone in your newfound, wretched life. Story 96. I thought it was grief, then depression. But genuinely, when my infant son was taken by my abuser, I had just given birth to him. He was so delicate, crying and needing to eat. The fear of my baby being behind a door, crying for me, knowing I did not know what that man was doing, made me feel helpless as I had to wait for the police to arrive. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.